Hello and welcome back to the Handy Outdoorsman. Today we're up at the property and we're going to be working on the tent. As you can see here, the canvas has been stripped of its integrity. It just basically was ripped to shred by the winds. It's pretty windy today too, so hopefully you can hear me all right. But what we're going to do is rebuild this tent. It's a Shelterlogic 10 by 20, and instead of putting another canvas covering back on it, which I'll be dealing with this in 3 years, that's how long this current canvas lasted, I plan on wrapping this with metal siding. But before I wrap it, I want to go ahead and reinforce this frame with a wood structure and just kind of give it additional strength, and then also it'll give me a place to secure the metal to in between these bars. Right now, if I just put up the metal on these pipes here that you see, I'm going to be able to fill in this gap between the pipes here, and what that's going to do is allow me to secure the metal to it, and then it won't be so flexible in the middle. So I'm going to frame it in, give it more structural strength, because as you can see here, it's pretty wobbly. But that's a game plan. That's what we're going to do today, is just fix this up. So I don't plan on showing you everything that I'm going to do for this. I'll bring you along and just show you the different phases so that you're not bored watching me work here. All right, so let me go ahead and get started and we'll get this done. So the first thing we got to do is get all this stuff out, and then I'll take some measurements and we'll begin. So one of the first things that I need to do is go around and tighten up all of the bolts. This thing has been out here for 3 years, the wind blowing it. I want to make sure that everything is tight when I go to put this back together, because once the metal's on, I may not be able to reach some of these bolts. Now that everything is tight, what I want to do now is come back and get all of these bottom bracing bars level from front to back. I'm not sure if the camera is picking it up, but from the back to the first pole, it kind of dips a little bit. I want those to be even and level all the way across. So I'll go ahead and loosen those brackets up at the T's, get those straight, and then tighten them back down. Alright, let me explain what I've done. I've taken a 2x4 and put it on the outside of the poles. I've clamped it on there so that I've got a straight edge that matches where the poles end on the outside. I've then come back and clamped a 2x4 on the inside that butts up against the 2x4 that I put on the outside. What that is doing for me is showing me exactly where the outside edge of the metal poles are. And this will help me when I go to put the metal on, that it'll all line up and then it'll all be flush from the outside, but I've got something to secure it to down at the base. Now these happen to be pressure treated 2x4s, and then once it's clamped in and then I have it where I want it, then I'm putting in Tapcon screws and securing it. And so now what I have is I have an edge that's even with the outside of these poles. Hope I can do this without making you too camera sick here, but as you can see right here, the edge of that 2x4 is flush with the outside edge of that pole. So hopefully you get the idea. Alright, so now I'm starting to put in the vertical bracing, and it's basically just to fill in the gap between the poles because there's just too much of a span and the metal will bend, somebody can kick it in. So by putting another vertical brace here, it's going to stiffen up the frame and allow the metal to be applied more securely. So what I've done is just taken a 2x4 and lined it up on the outside of the poles, so I know exactly where the straight line is. I take another 2x4, bring it in on the inside. As you can see here, I've drilled a hole in it so that my pipe can go through, and then I put a screw on this side through the pole into the 2x4 on the other side. And then same thing at the bottom, another 2x4, and then that's secured to the pressure treated that I put down. So that's how the vertical pieces are going to go in, and I've got 8 of those to put in. I got the framing done around the sides here. I still have another 2x4 that I need to put across here to give it a little bit more strength. But basically, where I had the 2x4, the pressure treated, going along at the bottom, I then put in these vertical 2x4s. I notched them at the bottom because I couldn't take the pole and cut a hole all the way through it without taking the whole poles out, so I just notched it. But at the top, I'll show you right here, I was able to remove this bolt, separate the pipes, and then run the pipe through a hole that I cut in the 2x4 itself to keep the integrity of the 2x4 there. So that's what we got done today. All right, I'm packed up, headed home, come back, do it again. All right, guys, today we're going to work on this back wall, and I'm going to frame it out like a regular studded wall. So what that's going to do is 2 things. One, it's going to add some rigidity to the frame itself. Right now, going this way, it does move quite a bit, but moving this way, it's pretty solid. And I think by putting in this back wall, that's going to help it this way. It's really going to lock it down to where it can't move. That's one. And 2 is that I want to build out this wall to where I can hang the shovels, the rake, the pick, all that kind of stuff, and it's off the ground, off the floor. And that'll be a nice sturdy wall to put hangers on to hang these things on. When I'm drilling the holes, or I should say pre-drilling the holes for the screws to go into the 2x4s, I find it much easier to take an awl and pound it through versus trying to use a drill bit. I've broken 2 or 3 bits. It's just easier to take an awl, pound it through till it just penetrates the top, and that's your pilot hole for your screw going into your wood. So here's the back of the wall, and what I've done is I've taken a string and I've run it from one side of the back to the other side, and making sure that it was flush on the outside. And then I built my wall to that string. I already know that the structure itself is not square, but I wanted to make sure that the wall was still flush with the back, so that when I put the metal on, it would all line up evenly with the frame of the structure itself. Okay guys, the framing's done. So what you're looking at in the front is an 8-foot wide opening. I tried to square it in. I've got to build some doors, but I'll do that after I get all of the metal on. Still trying to figure out what I'm going to do for doors, but I figure an 8-foot opening should give me plenty of room to work with. And if I need to fill it in, if I come up with smaller doors, then I can do that too. But we've got framing throughout, including the back wall. As far as these rafters go, I put them in for the snow load. We get quite a bit of snow here, and just putting that metal on with that much gap between the poles, it would just bend the metal. So I put these trusses in, if you will, and what's really going to hold that weight are these braces that I have going across each one of the trusses, not at the peak itself. When that load comes down, it's going to want to bend down, but by having these trusses in like so, that'll keep that pressing out motion. And that's what these are as well, because they're connected to the metal framing to keep it from expanding any further. But let me show you how I did the top of these trusses. It's just some metal strapping. I've got it on each side, and then I got a bolt, or excuse me, a screw in the center to keep this from moving this way, so it locks it in place. But when you push the load down, it's all being carried by the 2x4s that are going across. So the framing's all done. The next phase is to go ahead and put the metal siding on. So I'll do that in another video. So stay tuned as I bring you part 2 of modifying a Shelterlogic tent with metal siding. I appreciate you watching. Hope you enjoyed it. So until the next video, take care and God bless.